We pledge to say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge, the only place for proper, straight-talking debate. So, Donald Trump has finally picked his Secretary of State. And here he is, the very coolly named Rex Tillerson, who also happens to be the boss of Exxon Mobil. Trump says he's more than a business executive. He's a world-class player. Sounds a bit like your LinkedIn page, James. Today's Pledge players are Greg, talking about a test that can tell if your 3-year-old will end up in jail. Nick, who wants charity to begin at home. Michelle, who has a warning for anyone about to have their Christmas party. And James, who's taking us all back to our school days, some further back than others. But first, me. She was the mother of all liars, the worst mum in the world. Hard to forget Karen Matthews and her boyfriend's uncle, who faked the kidnapping of Karen's 9-year-old Shannon, made tearful appeals, mobilised police and public, and were then found guilty of hiding her as a way of extorting £50,000 reward money. That was in 2008. Now, Christmas 2016, Karen says she's turned over a new leaf. According to reports, she's stopped drinking and found God, and even stopped swearing. It seems she doesn't want our money now, though. It's also been reported that she wants mercy and forgiveness. If she's sincere, a big if, I say we should find it within us. What she did was awful and cruel and against nature. But we all make mistakes. She served her time. 'Tis the season of goodwill. So I say, panel, it's time to forgive Karen Matthews.
I think it's appropriate, as this is the last pledge of the year, to share some of the notes and how the programme is put together with the viewers. And we send round little briefing documents of what we're all going to talk about. The producers send it round. When I saw yours, I actually thought I'd misread it, because a woman of your intelligence and your worldliness couldn't possibly be making the case. This is what... Let's just set aside the fact that she conspired to drug... and to put her own daughter under a divan bed. I wish I could put that woman under a divan bed for the rest of her life. Should we also take a look at what she did for the area? Over 300 police officers were involved. At one point, 10% of the West Yorkshire police were involved. An investigation that cost millions of pounds. 3,000 houses were either entered or in some cases were raided, and 16 of the 27 special corpse-smelling dogs that are in the country were all deployed in West Yorkshire to try and find the child. That she had conspired to kidnap. She went down for kidnap, false imprisonment and perverting the course of justice, one of which carries a life term. She only got 8. I wish she'd had more like 28. And you're saying we should forgive her. I want to trap her in a divan. And just to make my point, let's go back to one of these. And just before we watch this, just remember, viewers, before you watch this is a pack of lies.
Please come home, Shannon, if you're out there, come home. If anybody's got my daughter, my beautiful princess daughter, please bring her home safe.
Well, I think that somebody out there will know Shannon was supposed to probably know me as well. And I just want her home safe, really. It makes me think now I can't trust people who's really close to me anymore. I just can't trust them.
I hope she has found God. I really do. And I celebrate that, because if she has found God, she will know what good and evil is, and she's evil personified.
Nick, listen, I mean, I didn't launch the debate. I know that what Jesus would do and what Nick Ferrari would do are completely different things.
Thank the Lord for that.
All I am saying is I'm not saying that she didn't do wrong. She obviously did. She has served her time. It's Christmas. Hollywood has allowed Mel Gibson back into the fold after he was arrested and said had an anti-Semitic rant against Jews.
It's not the same as tethering your child and drugging it. Of course it's not. But I think we are being a bit classist here. I think because Karen Matthews came from a very low-rent estate.
She was uneducated. She lived in a kind of... You think you say this, but why are we willing to bring back a rich, successful Hollywood mogul? Yes,
good and evil.
Yes, and I'm talking about forgiveness and justice and punishment. Greg, what do you think?
We are, but I mean, she came from a terrible estate. A mate of mine was a reporter on that story, and went there and said this was the worst estate he'd ever seen. I think a lot of the journalists who went up there were very shocked. Now that forgives nothing. I agree with you, but surely, people either, a lot of people coming off that estate would not have done this, behaved properly. They have, often have difficult lives, but they get through. She didn't. What she did was, I mean, if I remember rightly, didn't she see it? She saw the plot on a television show and thought, I can try that. And it was disgusting and despicable. But don't you still believe at the end of that time, if somebody says, I was wrong, I got it wrong, then actually we believe in forgiveness.
And also, she said, what people say is... Sorry, can I just remind you of some Christian doctrine? Now, I don't want this to turn into a Songs of Praise or religious programme, but Jesus said, and I don't even go to church, forgive, hate the sinner, hate the sin, not the sinner.
But has she said
Can
sorry?
we not do that in the case of Karen Matthews?
All I'm saying is, I'm just going back to your class point for a second. I didn't actually know she came from a council estate, actually. So I'm just looking at the merits of what she did. But let me ask you a question. OK, let me ask you a question, Richard. When you say forgive her, what do you mean by that?
Listen, she's been to prison. She's come out of prison.
Who's going to forgive her?
She's had to have plastic surgery in order to walk down the street.
Who's going to forgive her?
I think anybody with a heart would forgive somebody who genuinely repents and feels bad about what...
So what you're saying... So we sit around the panel here and we say, OK, we forgive her,
Why does it make life any better, or anybody's life any better, if we sit around saying she's an evil woman who should be cast into the hands of hell?
But let me just give you an example. Before we take a view, let's listen to the detective who actually ran the case. And we talk about the word evil. Let's see what he said.
Karen Matthews is pure evil. She started deceiving those closest to her from the very moment that Shannon was kidnapped. Friends, neighbours and family were under the clear impression that Shannon was genuinely missing. They had no reason to believe that Shannon had been taken as part of an elaborate scam or hoax. It's difficult to understand what type of mother would subject her own daughter to such a wicked and evil crime.
I mean, that just, to me, sums it all up. But my question is, who are we to forgive somebody? I mean, it's not our right to forgive. Is she asking the state?
She's asking for our forgiveness.
But is she? Because as I understand it, has she actually come out publicly and said sorry? Yes, but this is my point. So has she publicly come out and said, you know what, I've made a terrible mistake, I am devastated, I was wrong, I am so sorry. Number one, she hasn't. Number one,
let's just assume
her mate has,
let's
apparently.
Just assume for one moment that she has.
But she hasn't.
No, but let's assume she has. Would you then say, no, you can never have forgiveness?
So, no, I think step number one, when you've done something wrong, step number one surely is about acknowledging yourself that you've done something wrong. Point number one. And I haven't even seen that.
No, but Jesus says that. Let's just clarify one thing. She is seeking plastic surgery. She's not yet had plastic surgery. For someone like you, I'm not surprised that you can't empathise with folk on council estates. Someone like you...
Hold on, I'm the one who is empathising.
No, I am surprised. Because you live on a council estate, that does not give you licence to start imprisoning your own children.
What Greg was saying, she had no money, she needed 50 grand, didn't she?
I think if I know your backstory, well, you grew up in quite a challenged area.
I spent loads of time on a council estate. I wouldn't be knocking kids out with drugs and shoving them under a bed.
Tethering her under a bed. So what on earth does that suddenly give them a licence?
My point here is...
It's so insulting.
It's not insulting.
It's insulting to people on council estates watching this now. It's bloody insulting, because that's not how they live their lives. And I thought you'd know better.
Listen, obviously, she did a terrible thing, but my argument is it not punishment enough to be the most hated mother in Britain? I think it is. We should say she needs to find a way out of this.
So what are you asking for?
Why does it all make you feel so good
what are you asking
to live?
For? Tell me. When you say you want forgiveness, what does that mean? Like, to James's point, what do you want?
What do I want?
Yeah.
Well, I believe in the rehabilitation of offenders, curiously enough. I don't believe in putting people in prison and throwing away the key and thinking, well, that's great. I think it's much better that she has a productive life and she maybe puts something back into society that she took so much out of.
She's seeking an end to being shouted at in the street. She says she doesn't want to, but she thinks she's going to have plastic surgery. She wants to be a normal member of society. That's what she's after. But I'm sorry, there are some crimes that are so grave that, I'm sorry, apology, you just went to...
this is one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. drugging your own child.
Who would give the apology
Have you never
anyway?
given your children Calpol?
I've never tethered one of my children,
No, I
drugged
know,
him.
Nick, but my point is...
For money?
Yeah, for money. No, I've never tied my child under a divan bed, no. Sorry, I didn't know it was commonplace. You do it a lot, do you?
No, the girl, I know, she doesn't even live with this daughter now. By the way, she does... Listen, I'm not defending what she did. I am saying we need to move on. We need to rehabilitate people who do terrible things, who want some sort of way forward with their lives.
And if you genuinely believe that they regret it, that they've taken on a new life, surely what we should do in society...
But I don't actually believe that in the first place.
Well, if you don't believe that, then you wouldn't do it.
No, I would, because I think the beginning of that is she should come out herself. Yeah. And if she's become a born-again Christian and she's accepted that she was wrong, then come out and demonstrate that you're genuine, you're sincere. Getting a mate to speak on your behalf is weird.
Well, it probably wasn't a mate, was it? It was obviously... I mean, most newspaper stories that say sources close to mean that the person's talked to them, but they don't want to bring
Greg, I
names.
knew we'd have trouble with this lot.
That makes it worse.
It doesn't go well for the rest of the programme, does it?
To me, that makes it worse, because if she's not even prepared, you taking your words that she doesn't actually want to come out herself.
She's probably frightened of opening her mouth before people like Nick Ferrari.
Then I'm sorry. If you want forgiveness, show a little bit of remorse.
And you say your apology in person for yourself on behalf of yourself.
Okay. So if she did all of that, would you then say... No, I'm under Michelle. Would you then say, fine, I think society should forgive you?
Well, I guess it depends what you mean forgiving. Like, no one will ever forget, and I think we're going to go on and on and on with this one.
Well, we're not.
You're going to shut me up?
I'm afraid that's the end of the Christmas spirit, if there ever was any. Can there be a more odious contrast? As so many of our needy elderly cash in their life savings, or even forced to sell their homes to fund care in their old age, this government lavishes billions, yes, billions, lining the pockets of despots and dictators and on fatuous foreign aid projects. Schemes such as funding contraceptive clinics in Malawi, reportedly spending £4 million on the Ethiopian equivalent of the Spice Girls, and even a £15 million study into cattle with flatulence in Colombia. If it wasn't so tragic, it could be dismissed as a load of hot air. But the £12 billion annual foreign aid and development budget must be subjected to the most rigorous of reviews and, as much as possible, redirected to our own who are in such dire need.
Well, Nick, I go out every year, sometimes twice a year, to Uganda, where I'm involved in some projects there, and I see the work that is being done with government aid. And while inevitably there are going to be some scandals, and inevitably there are going to be some things that shouldn't happen, actually, the vast majority of what I see being used as foreign aid today, I think, is beneficial to that society. And I honestly don't believe you can equate the two here. We're going to have a fundamental problem, a deep fundamental problem in this country about social care, because we're getting into an ageing population. And as far as I'm concerned, I have no problem about people having to sell their houses to see themselves through at a period of their lives. They were not entitled. They're not entitled to being kept by the next generation. And the next generation increasingly are going to find it difficult because they are not particularly wealthy. Growth in this country isn't enormous, and we have a real problem of care. But I don't just saying, well, let's just scrap all foreign aid and that'll pay for it. Well, it might pay for it for a little while. But I don't think, if you want to judge a society, you judge it by what it does. We're still a rich society by the standards of whole parts of Africa and Asia. And I have no problem at all about continuing to support projects in those areas. I wish more of us did it as individuals as opposed to just through the state, but I do think it's important. I think the problem of aid and the problem of support for people in old age is going to get greater and greater and greater. And if you take one budget and solve it, it won't solve it. The problem continues. And we've got to try to work out what we do about it.
Do you not think it is faintly obscene that there will be people possibly watching this, or possibly their elderly relatives, who literally can't afford to turn up they're hoping for a mild Christmas because it means they don't have to turn up the heat. Last year, around 30,000 mostly elderly or vulnerable people died through the cold of the winter, which is about the figure, so there will be thousands again this year. And at the same time, we are funding contraceptive clinics, or we're sending money to countries such as India, who have their own space project.
Nick.
You do not... Is that not obscene, Greg Dyke?
No.
It's not obscene.
If you put it to space project or something, of course not. But I go to Africa quite a lot. I see the projects that we're supporting there, that we're supporting through some of it through government aid, some of it through things like comic relief. I go through voluntary service overseas.
I don't have a problem with comic relief. That's fine.
And I just think there's a lot of very good work being done. Right. But you are going to get into problems with some projects.
Rachel. We're having two different conversations. Thanks to your bolting together of these two things. We either need to talk about social care and how to fund it, and actually that has happened today. And the government has allowed local authorities to raise the precept they charge from the ratepayers by up to 6%, strictly hypothecated for social care. Jeremy Corbyn has said we should not have a cut in corporation tax to fund social care. And actually the head of NHS England, Simon Stevens, has also talked about the funding of social care today. We don't need to eat into the foreign aid budget necessarily to do it, which is one of the very few things that David Cameron is proud of, and I support him in this. Do you really want to cut humanitarian aid to Syria? You really do. And to Yemen. Do you really want to cut the money that was used to stop the Ebola virus spreading internationally?
Not well, if it looks after people in this country, because you look after your own first.
That is always your argument, Nick, on anything. Let's look after our own first. You don't realise if you don't sort out the problems overseas, they come onto our doorstep.
Because it's done us real well so far, James.
I really have a big issue with this. So I think Greg said, judge us by what we do. Well, I think we should judge us by what we do with our own first. Because if you don't have your own house in order...
We're internationalists, Greg.
No, it's not about being... It's about...
You're not queer.
Excuse me. No, what I'm saying...
You live in Monaco, that's the way you're an internationalist.
I think the government's job is to look after our own, and I think there are some amazing people in this country who are very philanthropic, and if they want to support these international initiatives, that's OK. But my honest opinion is, when I look at that list of the countries that we support, India is going to be one of the fastest-growing economies in the world. It doesn't need our aid. We have people starving. I mean, if you look at the budgets, the education...
India's 9th on the list, by the way, of foreign aid recipients.
You're falling for the same trap as Nick. I mean, you've become Daily Mail man in...
No. What I'm infuriated by is I can't understand that our education system is going to have a deficit of £3 billion. Our health service is short of money. The elderly right now are dying because of cold. And yet we want to support Afghanistan, and we want to give money to India and to you. No, it's ridiculous. Support your own first.
Michelle.
I agree with my two boys here.
There's a surprise, isn't there?
But to put it into some context, so we pay, 0.7% of GDP, that's £12 billion. That's a huge amount of money. And we keep talking about India, by the way, just to put context in, £186 million we sent to India when we're talking about India. And I just think it's too much. I have no problem helping people overseas, but only once, to your point, our house is in order, we've got ourselves sorted. I think when we've got these fundamental problems within society that are massively underfunded, it would be wrong not to at least consider what we're sending overseas and doing a review of whether or not that is still appropriate. And I think if that review was conducted, I think we would conclude it's perhaps a little bit over what we should be sending.
Sky News have been speaking to people even older than Greg Dyke, who are at the heart of this in the West Country. Let's hear what they're saying.
I think it's about time that the MPs in Parliament pulled their finger out their backside and sorted it all out. This country is getting to be a third-rate country.
I've worked all my life, paid in all my life to a sound. I worked until I was 65, and I'm getting nothing back for it.
Greg, you're a decent bloke. You see a lady like that. She's paid in decade after her husband probably... She wants help, and we're not giving... That's to James's point.
We need to work out how do we fund social care in the years ahead when there is a massively ageing population. And we haven't begun to do that. And scrabbling around by allowing councils to put 2% extra on the council tax or trying to take money from here. We've got to actually look at that and say, what do we do about this? How do we cope with an ageing population? And I don't think we're anywhere near
discussing the age budget, I think.
Well,
the aid budget.
Right, fine, you've scrapped the aid budget. Then what? What other budget do you scrap?
Well,
because
I think,
this is a never-ending
Greg,
issue.
you scrap anything that is not focusing on the population of this country that pays for that aid in the first place. You know, just that woman said, you know, she spent her whole life paying in so that when it came for her turn, you know, the government would be there for her. They're not there for her because they're redeploying some of the money that she paid in for causes that, frankly, she couldn't care less about. I just don't think... I think there are good people in this country. You know, I think Britain is incredibly charitable. You know, Comic Relief, you talked about, you know, it's got 800 million. People love to give. So I think when we want to support, you know, other countries and other issues, you know, people donate. I mean, I donate. I'm totally for supporting other people. This is about the responsibility of government. What is their priority, I think, is what Nick's talking about. And I think the priority is people here.
Are you saying that the 0.7% should be ring-fenced no matter what is going on in this country?
It is ring-fenced.
Yeah, but do you think... I know it is.
Yes, and I agree
do
with
you think it should be?
I agree with that.
Yeah,
yes,
regardless of what's going on in this country.
I agree. I don't think... We can't have...
Oh, dear.
Aid being voluntary.
Nick, we build a wall across...
I think this is going to be... Yes, I think we should have... You should have sat over there, really. Anyway, let's move on.
Build the wall.
That's two we don't agree on. Let's see how we get to the third. A remarkable study published this week has found that 45-minute tests on 3-year-old children appear to predict how likely they are to be criminals or need handouts from the state as adults. The researchers followed just over 1,000 children from the birth until the age of 38. They discovered that 22% of them, the ones with the lowest test scores, went on to commit 80% of crimes and claimed 66% of welfare benefits within the group. Although the study followed people in New Zealand, the investigators believe that the results could apply to other countries, including Britain. So if that's true, should society use tests like these to find which children have brain health problems and try to help them? I can see there are dangers. If we go too far down this path, we could end up stigmatising children at a very young age. But if, in the long term, it resulted in less crime, fewer misfits, less public expenditure and a happier, more contented society, wouldn't it be worth it?
It is very interesting, Greg, because, I mean, looking at what we've just talked about, would this have solved our Karen Matthews problem? I've had children, though, and they do change very rapidly from 0 to 12. And, you know, the idea that age 3, a mum is told, congratulations, your toddler's a psychopath, is a bit disturbing to me. I mean, I remember I grew up with... I grew up with 3 extremely violent male brothers. I remember my younger brother used to wander around the garden with a rock, just waiting to hit us over the head with it. And he's probably the
he's now the
calmest...
Foreign Secretary,
No. He's now the Health and Science Minister, you see. So he could have been written off age 3. Anyway, he's turned out to be a very calm and... actually, the most calm and measured of us all.
But actually...
So what I'm saying is, I think sticking labels on children can be problematic.
No, what I'm saying is you've got to look at the and as I say, the results came out this week. I haven't read the whole report. It'd be very interesting to look at it and see. But if just think theoretically, if it was possible to identify people who are more likely to be criminals, more likely to put a demand on the state and finance in the state, and you could do something about it. The question is, should you?
I think the problem is, how do you evaluate these people? Cameron said that we spent, was it £9 billion during his premiership on only 120,000 problem families. That would solve our foreign aid problem at a stroke. Find the problem families, sort them out, and use the money instead of cheating foreign aid on social care.
What's the definition of
Well, set them on the straight and narrow so they have productive lives rather than they're a charge on the state.
But at a 4-year-old, would you do that with a 4-year-old? What do you do?
Well,
you would have to give them more support, more help, understand what they're about. But, I mean, the study has done all and says, look, we can identify of the group they chose, we can identify, over 1,000 people, we can identify which ones are more likely to commit crime and more likely to be social deviants. I understand it, but so what
do you do, Greg? So you're a 4-year-old, you found a 3-year-old, you've done this test, and it says that potentially he could be a psychopath.
But if the interesting question is,
should you even consider
consider it? If you could do something, if you could then, by identify them, do some work with them.
Really good nutrition, extra attention, make sure they do go to school. All these things, there are quite simple fixes for these people.
So the ones who are really badly behaved and the ones who are potential criminals, we're going to look after and make sure they have a nice diet, and kids who behave themselves, we're going to ignore. The world according to Greg and Rachel. Well, you just have.
We're just not saying that. We said make sure they get the minimum standards of care and attention and maybe parenting.
Because they're potential
psychopaths. The kids that are all right are already probably getting.
No, they're potential criminals. I mean, look, what was interesting about it to me was not that you could identify kids at a certain age who were coming from a background which was more likely to lead them into crime. I think we could all probably agree that you could do that. The interesting thing was that they could do a test which demonstrated this. And then I sit with this dilemma: would you stigmatise them? In which case, is that a mistake, or should you actually just give them further? Is there a way of giving further support? I mean, what you know is it's going to cost more for that early period. But if that's what you're going to get, if in 30 years' time you get a less crime, you get less people demanding from the state because of this, is it a good investment?
Probably.
I think it is. And I actually, when you look at... Yeah, I know, shock horror kids. When you actually look at what they're doing a 45-minute examination. So they're doing lots of different tests. They're looking at intelligence, receptive language, motor skills. And what they're saying...
Motor skills?
Yeah, I don't think it's driving. I don't think they're referring to that. But what
3
they're
years
saying...
of age.
Yeah, but what they're saying is that the outcome of this test would basically show, like, there's way too little stimulation at home and stuff like that. So what you would actually do is, if you have children, and there's a whole different question around how and where you test them, but let's just forget that for a moment and assume you have tested them. If you then find that you've got children that are poorly stimulated at home, they're not getting attention, would you therefore stage an intervention into these children's lives and make sure that they are being correctly stimulated and all the rest to try and reverse some of the stuff that's been going on in those early years? And yeah, I would say do it. Because if you can get involved, there are lots of parents that can't be bothered with children. They'll have these children and they can't be bothered. If you can identify and intervene, why not?
So now we're actually going to take these children into state care,
That's
are we?
not what I suggested.
So what are we going to do? Go around every day and read them books?
No, but what you would do is, and bearing in mind I'm not a blooming child psychiatrist, but if I had a classroom and I had children that it was flagged to me that, right, this kid, understimulated, bad problems as a result of this, I don't know, you create a proper programme with their parents, you get extra stimulation, teaching. Yeah, but you bring the parents in.
But they don't care.
Well, you have to
make them understand. They're just down the bingo.
No,
you make them understand the consequences.
That's too general. Clearly there are going to be some who don't care, but there are clearly also going to be others who can't cope.
You can't just
who don't know how to do it. They didn't have that parental background themselves.
You create a divided society.
But they're already divided. If this is what the science shows, to ignore it would be foolish, because they will be stigmatised and they will be separated anyway as a result of all this.
OK, so let's leave that debate there. Class, pay attention. I'm next. And I'll be talking about your school days, all those years ago, which I bet looked a little something like this. Especially yours, Greg.
Yeah.
Panel, remember your school days? Does this picture ring any bells? It's the famous Toffs and Tuffs photo. Let's take a closer look. It works pretty well to sum up our own childhoods. There's Nick and Rachel on the left, ignoring the rest of us. But it shouldn't be just the likes of Nick and Rachel going to the best schools. A group of private schools is offering up to 10,000 places to children from poor families. What do they want from the government in return? The amount each place cost in the state system, about £5,500. Each side benefits. The government sends thousands more children to good schools. The private schools get to keep their charitable status. This country has a responsibility to prepare as many children as possible for the world of work, particularly in this tough economic environment. The scheme does just that. It gives more kids the benefit of a private education. Don't give me that look. Come on.
This says a few different things to me. Firstly, you're saying about it will help the government send thousands more children to good schools. Yeah, well, why don't you send many more than 10,000 students to good schools by actually sorting out the state schools? I don't like this kind of notion that the the answer to giving a good education to a child is to give them this Willy Wonka-style voucher system to this posh school over there, and therefore there's 10,000 kids there that are going to get their life sorted.
Michelle, don't denigrate such a great idea.
No, but surely, if you want to give kids access to decent schools, sort your schools out. And don't be under any illusions that the reasons that these private schools are doing this, which is all very well and noble of them, by the way, but they are doing it in order to protect their own tax status, which is worth 150 million a year to them. So, in principle, I kind of get why they're doing it, and I have no problems with it, but I think it's a bit of a cheek, actually, to ask the government to be putting more money into that scheme when they're already quite heavily subsidised.
OK, so let me just answer that specific point.
Yes, please.
So, number one, if the private schools didn't exist, they currently educate 470,000 children.
I know this.
Those children would go to a state school. The cost of that state education would cost £3 billion a year to the state. So 150 saving on one hand to the private schools. The government costs £3 billion. So the numbers are, you save 150 in taxes for the private schools, but it costs you £3 billion more. So actually, that's a very weak argument in my eyes.
But do you think
your maths don't add up?
But do you think though that it's right that what we're saying is, in order to give these 10,000 extra children a good education, we'll shove them into the private system? Do you not think we should be saying, let's reinvest into proper state educational facilities to make sure that the state schools are the best that they can be and should be?
I think you're right, Michelle. I think we should do all of the above. I think we should have a great state system. I think if the government wants to do grammar schools, we should do that too. I think we should invest in private education. I think the country has a responsibility. Not every child is the same. Every child is slightly different, and therefore there should be different avenues available. If there is an opportunity to give 10,000 children an education they otherwise wouldn't have, we shouldn't deny that.
Yeah, brilliant, do it, but don't ask the government to give you further subsidies to enable that, would be my response.
I think Michelle's making a really good point, and I think your argument is actually quite weak, James, because...
Ooh, steady.
What you're arguing that we should put state money into the private sector, essentially to save the private sector. Michelle is arguing that we should properly invest in the state sector. And on any objective criterion, Michelle has got the better argument, because it is far better that the 600,000 children in the state who are across the cohort every year have access to a better education than 10,000 children, selected children a year, have access to a exclusive private education. Michelle is absolutely right.
I've never understood why Labour governments have continued to give tax breaks to private schools. It's always been... I can't work it out. If those tax breaks at the moment cost 150 million a year, and this scheme would cost another 50, that's 200 million pounds that you could use to put around the state system. Now, there seems to be this discussion...
By the way, Greg, the state system is running out of £3 billion. They're going to cut £3 billion from the state system. So Rachel's eloquent argument, in the ideal world, you know, we don't have the money. No, we're £3 billion short as we are.
But when people like me suggest, actually, well, we should probably pay some more tax to do that, it's people like you who oppose it. So it hardly
I think we should stop the aid. I think we should stop wasting money.
Let's just clarify one or two things. Now, it's the group, the Independent Schools Council, is that educates those 470,000 pupils that you were talking of, James. So just to clarify that. But listen, you're right, but you're too utopian. Of course it would be wonderful if every school could be like this, but the reality is it cannot, and that is the harsh truth. This is a brilliant way that they get a bit back. The independent schools, I understand they keep their charitable status, which is great for tax, and in so doing, some children benefit. And to James's other point, which is I totally agree with you, we used to have schools like this, and they used to be called grammar schools. We have a government that seems to talk the talk, but do very little of walking the walk to actually get it closest to grammar schools. And of course, it'd be, every state school should be like that, and you say the same. They can't be. That's the reality. That's why I find for James.
Can I just say one thing? The interesting thing about the fact that the independent sector saves the state £3 billion a year, to me, suggests that there is an enormous amount of slack in the system. There is money available. Parents are willing to spend £30,000 a year to send little Lord Fauntleroy to one of those tough schools. People are prepared to spend money on education.
They are, you're right.
It's just that the state...
Who can afford it? The people who can afford it do it.
Nick pretends that we couldn't have, it's utopia to have really good state schools. Michelle is absolutely right to suggest we should have it. That happens in France.
They're not mutually exclusive.
It happens in Germany. They sort it out. We don't.
Let me just show you Let me just show you a clip from the head teacher of a state school.
Rachel's school that we're looking at.
On the surface, it may look like it's not a bad idea, and I think I'm always up for choice, and I'm always up for young people having a choice. However, I think behind it, I'm concerned about what it really does mean or what it could mean. And I think in particular, I'm concerned about whether it ends up being a selective system where only maybe the brightest students are able to get into some of the private schools. And I think also I'd be concerned about the effect that would then have on the state system as well, because in effect it's not just potentially taking the brightest students out, but it's also taking money out of the state system.
So I think he makes the point. I mean, it would be selective. There's no doubt about that. It will be selective.
So the issue is
which means if you're not very bright, but your parents have got money, you can go to that school anyway because they pay. But if you're from the states, if you're from a not very rich family, you can only go if you're bright, which seems to me.
We don't know what the criteria are yet, to be fair to
right.
James.
That's what I'm saying.
It could be completely means
The way you resolve it is you get the criteria right in the first place that avoids the issue you're talking about.
But also, I think there seems to be a general feeling here that somehow the state schools are all failing. They're not.
They're not.
A lot of state schools are doing...
They're giving private schools a run for their money.
A lot of state schools are doing very well.
I think it's excellent.
It is fantastic.
And if you take away... And I've always thought that the private school system in this country is incredibly divisive, and it's a class-based system. And actually, if by taking away the tax status it meant fewer people could go, that would suit me fine. I think that's a good idea.
And also then they would ramp up their fees even more than they do already, which is they're galloping way beyond inflation.
And more people would come from overseas, which is what increasingly... a lot of state schools in this country, a lot of public schools in this country are increasingly full of overseas students.
So let's take on the 10,000. Let's give them a chance. Michelle.
James, we will agree to disagree. I'm after the break, when I will be telling you all to have yourselves a merry little Christmas, but not too merry. Tis a season to be merry, except I can't help noticing some people taking their merriment a little too far. Whilst I love a tipple as much as the next person, and I'm the first to admit that even I can have a few too many, on occasion, I am shocked to see so many people absolutely plastered and completely vulnerable out on the streets. I'm more shocked having seen bar staff serve punters who are clearly absolutely off their faces. We have a law in this country which fines bar owners who serve alcohol to people who are already drunk. Worse than a fine, the bar owners could lose their licence. But the truth is, it's hardly ever enforced, and I think that is disgraceful. These profiteering bar owners are exploiting people who are in danger. If bar owners are not responsible enough to stop serving, they should not have their licence in the first place.
Michelle, I understand your point. There is clearly a law that addresses the concern that you have. I think the issue isn't about changing the law, it's about the enforceability.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think the problem is there's just too fewer people being prosecuted. I think over the last 5 years, the number any given year is less than 20. That, I think, says it all.
So you agree with me?
So I 100% agree. But the point I'm making to you is what you should be debating here is where is the problem in enforceability? The issue here is that you see somebody drunk. How do you actually get that to stick from an enforceability point of view and get the licence owner or the barman, etc., convicted? Because clearly a crime. So my concern is, what are you actually saying? What would you like to see being changed?
Yeah, so first of all, what am I saying and what am I seeing? I mean, we've got some pictures here, for example, of the kind of people in some of the states I'm referring to. Now, when I look at some of these pictures, they're, like, absolutely wrecked. And they've come from somewhere. More often than not, they've come from bars. Every street corner has pretty much got CCTV on the corner of them. You can see the bars that these punters are coming out of. Most bars have CCTV within them, so we need to be more active in terms of checking this footage. We need to be more proactive in having more police wandering around, going into bars. They offer fines at the moment. If you're being fined and you're consistently being fined, you should be absolutely hauled in front of a magistrate and losing your licence if you keep persisting with these fines. And those numbers that you describe, it's outrageous. You sound like you're about to explode next to me.
No, I'm not going to explode. I mean, I just think it's nice that you've all come as Christmas characters, because I note that I've agreed with James the whole of the show, so you're one of the three wise men. Congratulations. Rachel, you've come as Cinderella because you've been talking balls. Greg, for some bizarre reason, you've come dressed as a raspberry ripple, but it looks nice.
Christmas.
And you are the Grinch. You are the Grinch that has stolen Christmas.
You've never been on a night out with me. I'm definitely not a Grinch.
Well, I'm telling you, you're quite right. And the footage, I imagine they're young women, I couldn't see, but the footage of those people is absolutely wrong. And, of course, if they're vulnerable, they need help. But for some people, right, Christmas is their one big splurge. Now, it's different for you. I sense that perhaps you have a good time, you're out every week or every month or whatever, and they look forward to it, and they save up for it, and they've been working all year in the factories or all year in the stores or driving forklift trucks or whatever they've been, and they want to go out and get absolutely bladdered, plastered, wrecked, whatever, almost any verb in the world you can put a ed on, it'll work, whatever you want, absolutely tanked up. So let them do that, and of course, as James says, there are laws to stop them being served if they are too drunk, and I think the vulnerability is a separate issue.
Nick, I think you're
missing my point
No,
completely.
can I just say, you're all missing the point, and Nick, you are obviously the spirit of Christmas
Thank you.
on the panel. What this is about... You can't afford to get drunk in bars like that. What they're doing is they're going to the supermarkets, they're getting extra strength cider or vodka, which it's a loss leader. That is where the problem of drunkenness lies, and that is why no bar owners are being arrested for serving drunk people, because they're already drunk when they come in.
Yeah, but they're already... And by the way, I speak from experience as one of these girls that couldn't afford my nights out, so I did used to drink at home and get drunk with my mates and then mosey over to a bar. And the key point is I would arrive at these bars drunk, and they would serve me, they would serve my mates, and they will be serving those kind of people.
So
and
you think the state sanction should be on the bar, let's say the 18-year-old who's doing a holiday job, who served you a drink, you think he should pay the price for the fact that you came to a bar drunk and you asked for a drink?
No, what I think is, I'm not talking about an 18-year-old bartender, I'm talking about the owner of an establishment. If you want to get drunk, by the way, you know, it's Christmas and it's all the rest of it, what I'm talking about is irresponsible behaviour from the bar owners who are allowing drunken people, and we can debate what drunkenness is, but it's pretty obvious. If you're hammered, however you've got there, whether it's at home or in the bars, and you give that person extra alcohol, you should be fined. If you keep doing it, lose your licence, please.
Well, one, it's not that obvious. That's the reason. And actually, the effect of alcohol on people is massively different. Now, some people get completely... I mean, I remember seeing exactly that. I remember being in a pub in Tooting where the guy behind the bar said, "You've had too much, I'm not serving you anymore." And the guy then smashed the place up.
Yeah.
Well, then the bouncers need to get him out.
But not all pubs have bouncers.
Most of them do.
I just prefer everybody to have some individual responsibility rather than to make it the establishment's responsibility. I think we should all make a pledge. Especially you, Michelle, from what I hear.
I last week, because it's Christmas, I'm driving along and I get pulled into by the police.
Hello. Were you? Yeah. Is it your jacket?
No. They complimented me on the jacket.
It's a fashion crime.
I think that's what they thought I was drunk wearing. But, no, actually, I got pulled in by the police and they said, "Excuse me, no, I haven't been drinking for a month, right? I hadn't had a single drink for a month." And this policeman, I let down the window and he said, "Excuse me, sir, but when was your last drink?" And I felt so smug. I said, "A month ago." You know, feeling really good. And my wife sitting next to me said, "Do you want to ask me?" And this policeman said, "No, so I'm afraid we can't ask passengers to be breathalyzed." But I find what you're asking for too difficult. It's too difficult. It really is the nanny state at the extreme. And I just don't think
Why do you think the system's failing, Michelle?
Why do I think it's failing? Because there was a study, by the way, in 2014, where they got a load of actors to go out and pretend to be hammered. In 84% of the cases, the bars continued serving them. And this, for me, highlights the problem.
Michelle, bars want to sell drinks.
Yes, I know they do, but then all these people end up on the streets getting hoovered up by the paramedics and the emergency services, causing us all problems. But anyway, clearly, you all think that I am somehow a bit of a Scrooge because of my topic.
Ho, ho, ho.
But I really do want you all to have a great Christmas party. So, Nick.
Yes.
I've picked a song that I think you might want to play at yours. It's awesome. It's by your favourite band, Rob Johnson and the Corbynistas. Listen to this.
We're voting Jeremy Corbyn. We're voting Jeremy C. We like his ideas. They're fair and they're clear. Chester and me, we agree. We're all for peace and justice and anti-austerity. We're voting Jeremy Corbyn. JC for P and for me.
Did he say JC? He did, didn't he?
I
JC for Prime Minister.
I challenge you
That's
all
what I
not to be
heard.
going home tonight going, we're voting Jeremy Corbyn. I think you will.
It's the only time Nick and I have agreed all year. I'm not going to be singing that song on the way home. Well, panel, 2016 is nearly over, and thank goodness for that, say I. And to mark the passing of the year, which Nigel Faraj says changed everything, we're all going to choose what we think was the most important moment. Here's mine, and pay attention because this is quick.
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts.
Let's just show it again, just to make sure.
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts.
That was the moment. That was the moment of the year when basically someone in high office decided that actually we shouldn't find out the true facts. We shouldn't have any analysis. We should let everything be decided on our prejudice. Terrible moment.
To me, the most terrible story of the year is what's been happening in Syria. And I think the symbol of that tragedy is the heart-wrenching tweets and videos that 7-year-old Bana al-Abed has been sending to the world from Aleppo.
Lord, hear that. Mona from Aleppo, we are still alive.
We haven't got time to go into whether the West, anyone could have done anything, but standing by and watching what's been called a meltdown in humanity.
I think you're right, Rachel. I think when we look back in history, I think we're going to be not only embarrassed but shocked that we stood by and let this happen. I mean, I think you're right. Tragedy. Absolute tragedy. Well, my choice focuses on a person, one of many icons who passed away this year. This man was a true sporting legend who transcended the world of sport. I'm, of course, talking about Muhammad Ali. He had charisma, he had humanity, he shook up the world, and I believe the world is a better place for it.
I think you're absolutely right. He was the first world sporting superstar. You can look at the David Beckhams and all the basketball players now, the Schumachers and whoever else. They all really grew out of that. And this fashionable expression now, his backstory is truly extraordinary. Serving in the army, changing his faith, a tremendous fighter. But let's just remember, he did cheat Henry Cooper. We can never forget that. He cheated our...
You've got to kill it.
He cheated our enemy.
Well, that's one sportsman, and I've chosen a clip that sums up two big winners that I feel of 2016. The people everybody said stood no chance, but were the ones who had the last laugh in the end.
I am going right now to invite onto the stage the man behind Brexit and a man who led brilliantly the United Kingdom Independence Party in this fight and won despite all odds, despite horrible name-calling, despite so many obstacles. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nigel Faraj.
Who would have thought that this time last year, nobody, I don't think, or very few people would have predicted those two sharing a stage with the outcome that we've seen this year?
No chance. No chance. I mean, add Leicester City to it, and you get the best treble of all time.
Just reminded me what an awful year 2016 was, Michelle. Thank you for that. And as James Blunt tweeted, if you thought 2016 was bad, I'm releasing an album in 2017.
Well, quite rightly, panel, I get the final choice. Now, I've been thinking about this long and hard. What am I saying? No, I haven't. Taking a cue from you, Greg. It's obvious. Yet the team I've followed for more than 50 years, kicking off, actually, the year of the underdog, in a way. Leicester winning the English Premiership back in May, and that's the celebrations at Leicester's King Power Stadium, and then the underdog continued through Faraj and Brexit, through Donald Trump. Greg, got to bring you in. It was good for all of English soccer. Well, actually, all football.
It was brilliant.
And sport, actually.
That Leicester, who nobody gave a chance, who probably will get relegated.
No, don't say that.
Got a chance. But Leicester managed to win the Premier League against all odds. That's what sport's about in the end, isn't it? It's about the outside. It's about the person that nobody thought had a chance winning the Premier League. Brilliant. I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. And the sum being bigger than all its parts, whatever it is. Well, that's it from us for this week and this year. It's been a pleasure to tell you all how wrong you've been in 2016. We'll still be on Twitter, so you can let us know who won and who lost the final pledge debates of the year. No drunk tweeting, Dewberry, after the Christmas party. We're back on January the 12th. See you then.